Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Cyber Vigilance Podcast. So, today we're going to be talking about the topic of email security. And we wanted to talk about this one because, referencing back to our last podcast, we spoke a lot about the types of threats that people are seeing. And email was obviously right at the top. I suppose it's at the top of everyone's minds as well. Most common attack vector out there. So, thought it would be a good idea to talk about email security, what's happening in the market, what email attacks are out there. And so with that, I've also got our guest, Ella from Ignition. Ella, if you could just give a quick intro.
Of course, yeah. Hi guys, I'm Ella Coles. I'm from Ignition. I'm in the pre-sales team, so I'm one of the systems engineers here that is aligned to some of our vendors, and one of them being Abnormal Security. So that's one of the email security vendors out there that I deal with on a regular basis.
Great. Yeah. So I suppose one of the reasons that I wanted you to join me today is because you're seeing firsthand the types of emails that get in past secure email gateways, Microsoft, all that kind of thing.
Day in, day out, living it.
Yeah, exactly. So obviously you'll be able to talk about, what's out there, what we should be looking out for, how we're going to be able to protect against it. Great. So I thought we could start looking at the history of email threats, what people typically used to have to deal with compared to now. So I suppose just looking back, obviously the most obvious ones are those financial theft attacks where someone important wants to send you loads of money.
I'm a Nigerian prince. I want to give you money, or please send me money. I'm struggling.
Yeah,
they are classics, and they're still about.
Yep, you still see them, and I suppose it's kind of they're latching onto perhaps impersonating a person that you should trust. So maybe like a government official's reaching out to you, or like you said, a Nigerian prince, someone that you should trust.
Oh yeah, 100%. They're still about, and I will say they've updated themselves a little bit. I have some seen lately where it's like, oh, you've won some Bitcoin, or please send me Bitcoin. Like they're trying to be in the present day, but they're still so obvious that it's just a little bit painful.
Yeah, I mean, we still get them as well. I've seen them in our environment where there's these really long paragraphs, like a really elaborate story. And I don't know, I can't be bothered to read them anymore. Whereas, I
straight
suppose
to the delete or spam.
Exactly. Like as long as if I see an email that's got loads of paragraphs and a lot of it's like latching onto like a Nigerian prince or a government official, I'm just like, that's so obvious. I know exactly what that is. You're trying to fish me, to get me to give you money or whatever. I suppose it's kind of those kind of attacks. They were easy to detect, and following on from that, I suppose the phishing links that were very obviously malicious, and along with that, suspicious attachments. Don't open things that you don't know who they're from, or the link looks a bit dodgy. Fairly obvious. And then I suppose looking into the modern day, attacks have kind of shifted from that sort of high volume, low risk, and then moving into high impact, high value attacks. And they're doing this by learning how businesses are working. So I don't know if you can elaborate on some of the examples that you're seeing at the moment through doing proof of concepts with customers.
Yeah, of course. One of the big ones that I see of a lot recently is typically vendor impersonation, or even just a vendor being compromised and people utilizing that, because it's so easy nowadays to find out who's talking to who's working with who. It just takes a LinkedIn search and you have discovered who talks to who. And people will go out their way to impersonate these people. They will copy everything down to a T in terms of the email signatures, the branding, but there'll be a slight difference, either in a slight typo somewhere, whether it's the email or the signature, or they've got an old job title, for example. And it just takes someone to be on a bad day to be like, oh, that's Sarah from accounting, or so-and-so from that vendor, to not notice that it's not who they say they are.
I think as well, every business now works with so many different suppliers and vendors out there that it's probably quite hard to keep a grasp on who you're actually speaking with at each organisation. You can have all these policies in place, but there's just so many people that you speak with over email that it can be hard to figure out who's legitimate or not.
It's near impossible to keep on top of it as well, because a company could be so big that you've got no idea if this is the new person from accounting or finance that's suddenly emailing you. because
Mhm.
they're a huge company and turnaround is normally quite big for most places. So it
Yeah.
is really difficult for that sort of thing. So I can see the human side of things. But
Mhm.
yeah, the bad guys are doing a very good job at that.
Yeah.
The other two main examples that we're seeing is kind of funny because they're on very different ends of the scale. One of them is being just your simple plain text emails. The hi, can you send me your WhatsApp number? Hi, I have an urgent request for you.
Yeah.
That's where they're clearly just trying to prey on someone replying and to then try and get either some more information out of them, or it could potentially lead to, oh, buy me some gift cards, or here's a link to click to try and steal some form of information from them. And you'd be surprised at how many people just simply reply to these. I think they're just
Yeah.
trying to be nice people and don't want to
I
leave
think
someone hanging, but
yeah.
it's
And I
questionable
think
at
as well,
times.
like when they're impersonating like a CEO or something, for example, like you feel like you need to reply, or now
Yeah.
that we're not all working in the same office a lot of the time, you can't just turn around and like they're there and
Yeah.
be like, oh, did you mean to send this? People working from home, so you might mistake that as an actual genuine request from your CEO.
Yeah.
I used to get them all the time. But obviously I knew that like a lot of the time the subject header would be like hello or just urgent, or
Yeah. They
sometimes I even see
do.
them now where they put like obviously when you reply to an email it has
Mm,
and I've never had an
yes.
email before, so it makes it look like you've already had communication
Looks like you've
with
had a,
that
yeah,
person.
exactly that. They
Yeah.
also do it where they will try and stalk LinkedIn to find like brand new starters and then
Yeah.
obviously impersonate someone important. And as a
Mm-hmm.
brand new starter, never in a million years are you going to not reply to someone that's impersonating either like your CEO, your boss, the
Yeah.
person that deals with banking to pay you, that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. You're never not going to reply to that out of the fear that
Yeah.
that's your
I've
boss
even
or that's that.
seen I've even seen like nicknames being used in emails,
Yes.
so where people shorten their names, and that might not be so obvious on LinkedIn, but maybe they've commented
Mm.
on something and someone's replied with their nickname, and the phishing emails that attackers are picking that up
There
and
you
they're
go.
replying with that nickname, and it gives it
It,
makes it more real, I
it's
suppose.
scary how they get certain information, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yep.
yeah, so there's those plain text ones, and then we've got like the complete opposite end scale where, again, they're probably doing their homework out on the internet, out on LinkedIn, out on all the sites that you have available to you, where they are fully impersonating a login page or something like that. So they're sending out the dodgy link to be like, oh, your Microsoft password needs resetting, click this link to do it. And the page that it would lead it to, typically it's obvious, you can tell that it's a fake login page, but in these scenarios we're seeing it where they have copied branding to a T, where we've been in POCs before where I've put the two sites up next to one another and gone, tell me which one isn't legit, and they can't do it. And if the
Mm-hmm.
IT guys can't tell me which site is theirs, what's the hope of anybody else in the company doing it?
Yeah.
And like we said, it takes one bad day of someone not realizing that isn't a legitimate email, clicking it, seeing a page they're fully familiar with and thinking everything's all good. And then their credentials are somewhere on the dark web because they've
Yeah.
entered it into a login box that they shouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some of these as well, and I would have no idea which one would be the real one or not.
It
And
is
you just think you're
difficult.
following the typical process, and
Mhm.
yeah, it's a dodgy website. You
Yeah.
genuinely can't tell. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I think that kind of summarizes, yeah, a lot of what we see as well. The new age of email-based attacks, they're
Mhm.
a lot more sophisticated. They're harder for Microsoft, Google, your secure mail
Mm.
gateway to pick up. And I think to add on to that, we're also seeing a lot around QR code phishing. A lot harder to detect. How you like normally you'd see a link and you'd be able to tell
Yeah.
if something looks not quite right, but how
Just
are you meant to
slightly off.
hover over a QR code? Yeah.
Yeah. And also, I feel like in today's society, we are kind of trained to scan QR codes. It's like
Mm-hmm.
all the marketing stuff is typically QR
Yep.
codes, or like websites or things just out in the street when they're trying to give you information. It's QR codes. And
Yep.
just by natural, you scan it and you go, oh, let's
Mm-hmm.
go to that site. And it's not until the page actually loads that you realize what you've scanned and where you've gone.
Yeah.
So I can see why they've gone down that route. And it's definitely difficult to pick up. And
Yep.
traditional security mail gateways are really struggling to stop with QR codes because they can't register the link that it's going to.
Yeah, and I think as well, like as I work in marketing, and I'm starting to doubt putting QR codes out there, because obviously it's such like a big message at the moment. Obviously they're calling it quishing, but I don't necessarily like that term. Everything in cyber's got to be an acronym or ishing. Yeah, it's a bit weird, but I'm kind of drawing back on putting QR codes out there just because I don't trust them now.
I would say in person, if you've got a QR code scanned, it's more trustworthy because people are at an event they know. But over LinkedIn, starting to get a little bit dodgy because you just can't trust anything out there now.
No, definitely not on LinkedIn for sure. No. So I suppose as well, other ones we're seeing, the invoice fraud attacks, like we said, impersonating someone in accounts. I've witnessed firsthand where someone's paid a very chunky invoice to an account where the domain had a slight change in character, and that caused quite a big invoice fraud attack. So
they're really difficult to pick up as well, because typically there isn't anything actually malicious in the email, like the PDF or the invoice itself, completely clean. There's no links, there's no attachments, so they just come straight into the email, and it's all down to the actual person to identify if it's correct or not.
And attackers are getting a lot more savvy, like you said, around learning what processes your business have. So being able to determine what kind of forms need to be completed in order for an invoice to be paid, or what details they need to provide. And it does just take one bad day for an employee to everything looks normal. Why would you even question it? So seeing a lot of that, and that's definitely obviously massive impact in terms of financial theft. Really difficult to
it's a lot of pressure to put on end users.
Yeah, that's the thing. We expect end users to be the biggest. That they've got to have this ability to detect every single dodgy email, but you don't expect, for example, you would hope that your endpoint protection would protect you from everything, but you don't. No one says it can protect you from everything, so why should your users be able to protect you from everything? It's the same principle.
Exactly.
There's just such a heavy reliance on people now, and obviously that's reflected in security awareness training, which everyone knows can be quite boring and tedious, and isn't always that up to date in what you should be looking out for. It's quite generic. So if you're providing really boring training, why would you expect people to be able to detect everything?
There's always grumbles in the office when training comes in for that sort of thing.
Yeah, everyone hates it, I think. Although I'm seeing a lot more interesting technologies out there that are incorporating user behavior and other aspects into the security awareness training. So you're not having to rely on those like 20-minute long videos with a silly little quiz at the end. There's other ways to train users rather than that route. So I feel like hopefully, obviously, security is top of mind for everyone, and newer forms of training will reflect that as well. So I think there's new stuff out there, definitely. So I suppose I want to move on to protecting from these email attacks. And I think traditionally, obviously, there were secure email gateways, and looking at those historic threats, they were fairly easy to detect. So relying on that known bad policy, if you know that something's coming from a dodgy domain or a dodgy IP address, they can be blocked easily because they're already known to be bad. But I think where it's falling behind is that in security, there's not necessarily a known bad anymore. It's always unknown that you want to protect from.
If it's not known, how are you meant to stop from it? So that's the issue with the known bad concept. Sadly, it was great, like you said, when things were simple, but times have changed. They are finding a lot of creative new ways to get to us.
Yep, exactly. Attacks are a lot more sophisticated, so you kind of need to level up your security in that sense. So I think there's still a place for a secure email gateway. They do a lot of things that obviously is a business requirement, but there's in the market with email security seeing a big disruption because of the introduction of integrated cloud email security tools. So like Abnormal, where it's not a secure email gateway, it's relying on behavioral AI, knowing what your users are used to and being able to block all the things that are unusual, in Abnormal sense, the abnormal emails, which is a great name. So yeah, understanding things that are out of the norm, looking for, I suppose, the known good and blocking everything else.
Exactly.
And secure email gateways traditionally are quite expensive. So implementing a tool like an integrated cloud email security solution can actually save you quite a lot of money as well. So it's disrupting the market in that sense as well. A lot of people are looking to consolidate their Microsoft tools.
That's a big play. Most secure email gateways as well make you turn certain aspects of like your Microsoft licensing off. So I'm seeing a lot of people are like, no, we actually want to utilize what we're paying for. So I need to find something that can use that. And the other benefit of kind of the ones that are integrated within the cloud email is with typical secure email gateways, there's a lot of config that goes into it. And I mean a lot of config. It's very time consuming getting it all set up. So the fact that something like Abnormal, for example, takes a minute, if that, to plug in via API, it saves people so much more time than having to like set a day aside just to configure your email security.
Yeah, and then I suppose the maintaining of that as well. A lot of these cloud solutions, it's almost like a set and forget. It does what it's meant to do. It learns over time. You don't have to constantly go in and change any configuration policy. Yeah, exactly. So I think
just plug and play essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's kind of where the market is shifting. There's definitely a lot changing in email security. So it's one to keep an eye on, for sure. And yeah, with the Microsoft licensing, that's increasing. The costing is going up. So why not utilize what you're using there? Because it's not necessarily it's a great product. So why don't you make the most of it and plug in these other tools that add onto Microsoft's capabilities rather than just scaling it back with a secure email gateway?
Yeah, 100%.
So I think obviously we've been talking a lot about the inbound when it comes to email security, which is obviously top of people's mind. They want to block all the bad stuff coming in, but there's a bigger email picture out there. So it's not just those inbound, it's also your outbound. So what are you doing in terms of data loss protection? You need to consider that. Obviously you can have that with Microsoft, but is it doing exactly as it should be doing? That's a massive area where there's obviously data loss protection. You want to protect your data. Is so valuable, and it
you
can
need to know where it's going, who's sending it where. All of that, essentially. Control what's coming in, but also control what's going out.
Yep, definitely. And then obviously the account takeover, user compromise, being able to understand, has someone's email account been compromised? Are they therefore sending out emails with requests? Yep, being able to determine, has someone automatically logged in from like Hong Kong and they've never been in Hong Kong before, and it was a minute after they just logged in the UK? It doesn't make sense. So being able to have tools in place that can recognize that and shut those accounts down quickly to stop any kind of attacks happening there. And then you've also got grey mail and spam. This is another massive one where we speak to customers. Their CEOs getting tons of emails coming in that they just don't want to even look at. Being able to stop that grey mail and that spam email can save so much time. I think, what is it, taking into consideration that it takes maybe 30 seconds to read an email. And if you get
something along those lines.
Yeah, if you get hundreds of those come in, that's so much of your time taken away just from these unwanted emails.
Yeah. From the Abnormal POCs, because they have a grey mail aspect to their product, we have simply sold that product based off of the amount of time they would save with grey mail. Oh, apologies there. It's a case of that we might not have found the huge smoking gun. Like, they were kind of aware of maybe all the things that were coming in, but they're happy that Abnormal would have stopped them. And then we go show them the grey mail figures, and they are actually surprised at how many Domino's or
Yeah.
like newsletter emails that are spamming their inbox, especially when they give you the top 50 or top 10, I think it is, of recipients of the most amount of grey mail. And it's even better when the person on the call is like at least in the top 5. And they sit there going, yeah, I knew I had that many. But grey
Yeah.
mail is a huge thing. It honestly floods the inbox.
Yeah.
And
And I
no one
think
can ever be bothered to go hit unsubscribe to anything.
yeah, no, I'm exactly like that. I never unsubscribe. I was like, oh, why am I getting that email? And I think that's where Microsoft and Google perhaps fall behind. I know a lot of people that just rely on Microsoft's own email security. They're still getting all these spam emails come through. So having something on top of that massively can reduce time spent looking at unwanted emails.
Yeah.
And then I guess we've already spoken about it, but user awareness training, massive thing that's out there. Users are, they've got to be on top of all their latest attacks, I suppose, in a sense, and what they should be looking out for. But while that's ever evolving and new attacks are coming in, people would spend half of their job just learning about all these new attacks, right? So having kind of a combined approach where you've got a advanced email security tool, very comprehensive user awareness training, and then all those other aspects, and then I think you're kind of on the way there at defending against those attacks. But like with everything, there's always going to be the odd one that comes through. Someone
That'll
has a
always
bad
be
day.
the odd one. Yeah. I feel like you need to have strong tech in place. That user awareness kind of is the last thing, but you are still training them. So when the odd one does come in, you know you've trained them well enough that they'll hopefully pick up on it. But the tech, in theory, we should hopefully one day be in a place where it will stop the majority. And then the users don't have to feel all the pressure of identifying every single email.
Yeah, exactly. I think that sums it up quite nicely, because I think a lot of the time the messaging is around, from security awareness training platforms anyway, that the users are your first line of defense, but it shouldn't be that way, I think.
No, there's an element of it, but it really shouldn't be that way, because otherwise everyone's just going to keep clicking links because they're getting more and more sophisticated.
Yep, definitely. So great. I think we've kind of covered a lot of the aspects of email security that's happening at the moment. So we've looked at those attacks that are bypassing secure email gateways, Microsoft, Google. So yeah, I think that was a great roundup of kind of the market as well, what we're seeing out there. So thank you very much, Ella, for joining me on today's podcast.
Thank you for having me.
So yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and hopefully we'll join you for the next podcast. Thank you.